So the top job of the U.S. military under my watch, I'm not also going to be on the one-sided receiving end of a war that we refuse to wake up and see. And we are on the receiving end of a one-sided opium war in this country. That's how we actually solve the problem. The wall has not been enough. We have to use the military to seal the border.
I've heard that you're going to consider a military assault on Mexican drug cartels. Is that true?
I don't think we're going to have to get there.
You don't?
What I've said is that we will use the military to secure our own southern border.
Okay.
I believe the top job of the U.S. military, I'll give it to you, part of what's happened in our military, I mean, I know with your experience, you may have unique perspectives on this yourself, and so I don't mean to be talking at you on this, but I'm sharing with you my perspectives on why I think the military's lost its way, is that it's lost its sense of purpose, actually, especially at the top. Especially starting with the commander-in-chief, but also the managerial class in the Pentagon. When an institution loses its way, that leaves a void. That's when poison fills the void. Wokeness in the military, that's a symptom of a deeper loss of purpose. Fighting wars that I think have not advanced the national interest of the United States. And so the top job of the U.S. military under my watch is to protect Americans here on American soil, protect the homeland. Number 2, deter war. Number 3, win wars when necessary. So I go in that order. So I don't want to start some war that's not going to be necessary, but I'm not also going to be on the one-sided receiving end of a war that we refuse to wake up and see. And we are on the receiving end of a one-sided opium war in this country that China's quietly waging on us. China is actually, I'm not making this up, from all places, Wuhan, China, come the synthetic precursors to make synthetic fentanyl in the hands of Mexican drug cartels south of our own southern border. And if you have any doubt about the intentionality of that, ask yourself why there's hundreds of Chinese chemists south of our own southern border working with those drug cartels, pumping up fentanyl across our southern border, not marketed even as fentanyl, but lacing it in Percocet and other drugs that people don't know fentanyl's in. That's what's happening in this country. By the way, this is just an aside, but if China can do that, to use fentanyl as an intentional tool as an opium war in the United States now, I don't think it's a far-fetched to at least ask the question, same place that a man-made pandemic originated, of whether the pharmaceutical supply chain could eventually be laced with the same fentanyl as well. I think it's a legitimate question to actually ask. If they're lacing Percocet that's coming in illegally through the southern border, why wouldn't they lace legal Percocet through that, which is the supply chain relies on from China as well? And I say this as somebody who knows a little something about this industry. As we know, what begins as a conspiracy theory originally becomes a prediction of reality tomorrow. I think we have to be asking these questions. What I've said is that, no, I do not want to be on the side of a one-sided war that's being fought where we refuse to acknowledge it. But I want to be smart about this. Here's how we're going to do it. We will use the military to to close the holes in the Swiss cheese of a southern border that we now have down there. That's how we actually solve the problem. The wall has not been enough. We have to use the military to seal the border. That, I think, solves the influx of the migrants, the influx of 14,000 people entering this country daily, illegally. 50,000 deaths, 50,000 plus deaths, probably more per year resulting from fentanyl illegally crossing that southern border. And then also eliminate the incentives. No federal funding for sanctuary cities. That's disastrous. Not a dime of foreign aid to Mexico or Guatemala or Belize or Nicaragua. I have no patience for it. We're done with it until we have worked with them effectively to close Mexico's own southern border, actually, which is actually where many of those migrants come from.
I mean, do you think
that's how we address the border crisis?
Do you think that's even a possibility? Because the cartels are so, they're intertwined with government now.
Well, here's what I will say. You're right. Mexico needs to regain its own sovereignty. So here's the steps I would take. First, seal our own southern border with our military. That, I think, is solvable. Next is Mexico and these other countries, they're not going to get aid until they actually regain their own sovereignty. Now, it's not as much of a lost cause as it might seem, right? I mean, Obrador has been a disaster. AMLO, he's the president of Mexico now. His hugs, not bullets policy, it's been a disaster, as you would predict. You actually had a president who came before him who was actually willing to be tougher on this issue, but we have a presidential election coming up in Mexico, actually in 2024. I'm paying close attention to this. Claudia Sheinbaum is the lead candidate. She is from AMLO's party, but she's a different person. And so here's what I plan to do. We'll seal that southern border. We'll close the tap on any aid. And I'm going to have a conversation with Claudia, if she's indeed the duly elected president, early on in my term and say, listen up. We will help you regain your sovereignty by providing aid for a tiny fraction of what we gave to Ukraine, which, by the way, I'm done with that. We'll talk about ending the Ukraine war, but that's what we need to do. This is a war that does not advance American interests. I will end it. I have a clear vision and plan of how to do it. Okay, we should not be protecting the invasion against somebody else's border somewhere halfway around the world when we have an invasion on our own southern border that we're doing nothing about. So for a tiny fraction of that cost, I will tell Claudia, we will help you. We will do it for a tiny fraction of what we spent in Ukraine. We will help you regain your sovereignty. We're using our military to seal our own border in the meantime. You're not getting a dime of aid from us in the meantime. It is not in your interests to continue this hugs not bullets policy. Solve your own problem. But if you don't, and if it's still spilling into our yard, then we will come in and solve it for you. That's the answer. If you have a neighbor, just think about it in your neighborhood, okay? You don't want to go into your neighbor's lawn and shoot the dog that comes and keeps biting your family members. That's your neighbor's job to take care of. But if you have a dog that daily comes over, a rabid dog that's biting your own family members, then you show up when that dog is about to come over and you shoot it and you bring it to its end. That's how you solve it. First, you build the fence. Make sure the dog doesn't come over. I will take that step even sooner than shooting the dog. But if that dog is still coming through that fence and biting my family members, yes, I will take over and go over in there with whatever gun of a size needed to get the job done and put that dog to its end. So I refuse to be on the receiving end of a one-sided war, but I don't think we're going to have to use our military over it because we will make sure that Mexico solves its own problem. I have full confidence they will. I think Claudia Sheinbaum will have an incentive to regain her sovereignty in a way that AMLO did not have a spine to do. But it's going to take a president with a spine to see that through, and that's what I'm bringing to the table.
You really think that Mexico can take care of their own problem?
They can still, if we with aid. I mean, with a tiny fraction of what we've given. I mean, think about what we've given. This clown in Eastern Europe really can't even account for what we've given him. I mean, Abrams tanks. We're talking about how many javelins we've given. This is for a fraction of what we've armed Zelensky with. Yes, I do think it is still possible for Mexico to get this job done.
If they can't, and we do have to send in military to go down there, have you thought about how you would do that?
Yes, it needs to be lit up with intelligence first. So the problem is the NSA has completely abandoned any intelligence operation south of our own border, wasting intelligence resources in the Middle East that I think are a far poorer use of our resources. So if Trump was able to do it to ISIS, that was a far harder challenge. I think my challenge in doing it to Mexican drug cartels would be much easier than what Trump had to do with ISIS.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.